I leak the secret dressing room audio that proves Manchester United's manager is lying to everyone. One player's confession reveals why their tactics will never work. Stick to the end to hear the truth their board is trying to bury. Manchester United had spent years wrestling with their own shadow. A club that once roared, now learning to whisper through corridors filled with echoes of what used to be certainty. No 2 weeks ever looked the same. No goal ever felt like it belonged to a pattern. Not even the defeats carried familiar lessons. And as the months unfolded under Ruben Amorim, unpredictability became the only rhythm that stayed loyal. What made their story compelling was not the mathematics of the league table, but the emotional turbulence that charged every moment, every misstep, every unexpected victory that appeared like lightning across a clear sky. Those watching from the outside always tried to map a straight line through chaos, not realizing that chaos itself had become Manchester United's most defining compass. It was almost amusing how the narrative circled back to that strange afternoon when Manchester United lost at home to an Everton side reduced to 10 men, looking like the team that was outnumbered. It stunned supporters, infuriated critics, and puzzled neutrals who could not reconcile how the same squad would later storm Selhurst Park and dismantle a Crystal Palace side unbeaten at home for 12 long games. Joshua Zirkzee, who had gone nearly a full year without tasting a goal, suddenly found the net as if he had been born for big moments. Mason Mount, whose fitness had been debated more than his potential, powered through with a strike that carried the weight of the club's doubts and expectations in equal measure. Those two goals, arriving in such improbable fashion, became symbols of the identity forming under Ruben Amorim, an identity sculpted not from consistency, but from defiance. Yet this era did not begin with triumph. It began under skies that felt too bright for Manchester. On the 1st of November 2024, the day Ruben Amorim arrived from Lisbon with a quiet intensity that fooled no one. The sun that welcomed him contradicted the storm he was walking into. Even before he spoke, even before he set foot in Carrington or Old Trafford, the air around the club crackled with the pressure of a lineage that devours managers whole. He arrived with ideas forged from his years at Sporting, ideas soaked in structure, pressing, positional aggression, and a back three system that he had once worn like armor. But ideas meet reality, and Manchester United's reality had sharpened itself on the bones of coaches who believed they could bend it. A third of the way into his first full season, enough had unfolded to judge transformations not by words, but by scars. There had been a stretch, a flicker of brilliance, when the performances whispered that this team was finally rising. The work rate ticked upward. The press hit with more conviction. The defensive line seemed brave enough to survive games that would once have broken them. And behind everything stood a goalkeeper who could catch, calm, and reset the aggression brewing in front of him. It was a fragile progress, but progress nonetheless. Still, numbers rarely hide their verdict. Only one loss since early October. And yet, the number of goals conceded dragged behind them like rattling metal. They were 7th in the league, but 4 points off second, an absurdity that captured the disorder of the Premier League that season. How could a team so porous still be brushing shoulders with contenders? That question alone defined the duality of Ruben Amorim's Manchester United, a side that constantly stepped 1 inch from brilliance and 1 inch from disaster. When Ruben Amorim sat for his 1-year anniversary interview, the layers of truth revealed themselves in ways statistics never could. He admitted openly that Manchester United had overpowered him at first, that the job, the weight, the glare, the expectations stitched into the fabric of the badge had shaken him. He confessed that the coach who arrived was not the same man who now stood before the cameras. Something in him had evolved or eroded or adapted in quiet ways. He spoke of ideas that had to be reshaped, not because they were wrong, but because reality demanded a different language. He talked about pragmatism, about understanding when to build slowly and when to strike long, about choosing possession, not for beauty, but for survival. It was an admission of transformation, an artist forced to sculpt with new tools. Manchester United's long-standing discomfort on the ball had not vanished under him. It had simply undergone translation. Long balls became more common, not as a surrender, but as a calculated manipulation of space. A small shift, statistically 4 percentage points more long passes compared to his sporting side, but enough to fundamentally alter how transitions developed. When Arne Slot commented on these patterns after the Liverpool match, he was pointing at the evolution of a system learning to breathe differently. Ruben Amorim did not abandon his back three philosophy, nor the wide, aggressive fullbacks who carried his identity into every match. But he allowed the structure to bend, breathe, and sometimes retreat into something grittier. The Crystal Palace match, perhaps more than any, showcased the duality, a first half drowning under pressure, followed by a second half that exploded with coordinated pressing, cruel efficiency, and set-piece ingenuity. Both Manchester United goals, the quick, intelligent free kick by Bruno Fernandes that freed Joshua Zirkzee, and the rehearsed routine that allowed Mason Mount to punish a scrambling defense, revealed a team no longer depending on chance, but manufacturing chaos with purpose. But defending remained the demon they could not exercise. Joint highest goals, conceded among the top 10 sides. Level with Liverpool, a comparison nobody wanted. Mistakes crept into matches like whispers in dark corridors. Lenny Yoro, so commanding in flashes, found himself haunted by the moment he fouled Jean-Philippe Mateta, a moment that derailed his composure and forced his early exit. These lapses did not define the system. They exposed the psychology beneath it. And that psychology, the intangible terrain of confidence, fear, resolve, and collapse, became the true frontier where Ruben Amorim made his mark. What changed most at Manchester United was not tactical, but spiritual. The late equalizer by Matthijs de Ligt against Tottenham did not come from structure, it came from refusal. The wonder strike by Amad Diallo against Nottingham Forest came not from pattern play, but from belief erupting in crisis. Even in defeats to Liverpool and Brighton, the response after conceding proved something had shifted. They no longer dissolved after a setback. They no longer abandoned themselves when the tide turned. The fragility of years past, the emotional collapse that ripped through squad after squad, no longer commanded the room with the same authority. Yet progress is never linear. Crystal Palace had played a draining Europa League match in France, days before facing Manchester United, and still, the first half at Old Trafford felt like watching a team begging the whistle to come early. That contradiction, a United side looking exhausted while their opponents were the ones meant to be limp, fed the frustration that still clung to every performance. The second half resurgence only raised the question of why they had required suffering before responding. Joshua Zirkzee embodied this duality more than anyone. For most of that match, he stumbled through touches and duels, contributing little except frustration. But once he scored, he transformed. Confidence flooded him. Every movement sharpened. Every involvement grew purposeful. He became a different player entirely. This dependence on emotional ignition troubled many observers. A club cannot rely on bursts of belief forever. And yet, Manchester United had learned to survive on moments long before Ruben Amorim arrived. He did not invent the chaos. He simply weaponized it. Bruno Fernandes remained both the heartbeat and the riddle. He could deliver a world-class performance one week, like the disguised touch that crafted a goal against Brighton, or the perfect cross that allowed Harry Maguire to bury Liverpool only to return days later with a penalty miss that stole points from Manchester United's pocket. His influence was undeniable, his inconsistency equally so. And still, without Bruno Fernandes, the entire narrative might collapse into a void. Kobbie Mainoo hovered on the edges of opportunity, a prodigy waiting for a stage that time refused to extend. With Manchester United fighting in only the Premier League and a January starting FA Cup, chances became rare gems. His competitor for the role, the one player Ruben Amorim would never remove from the lineup, blocked the path, not through politics, but merit. Mainoo was growing, but the pace of his growth was throttled by necessity, not neglect. The criticism sharpened when analysts noted how Crystal Palace, despite exhaustion and travel, still carved through Manchester United in the early phase of their encounter. And Everton, even with 9 outfielders, managed to glide into United's box and fire cleanly. The goal by Gerard Branthwaite that afternoon felt like an indictment of the defensive structure, a symbolic scolding that refused to stay quiet. But the fixtures ahead, West Ham, Wolves, Bournemouth, Aston Villa offered a rare window where even pessimists admitted momentum could bloom. West Ham were sinking into relegation form. Lucas Paqueta's suspension added advantage. Wolves looked like the league's ghost present, competing, but barely alive. For a club desperate to string 5 consecutive wins, this stretch became an invitation fate rarely offers. Ruben Amorim stood at the center of all this. Criticized, defended, doubted, admired. His leadership survived storms that would have broken others because he understood something about Manchester United that many managers never realized. This club does not respond to perfection. It responds to struggle. It responds to the edges between collapse and resurgence. It responds to fights, not formulas. He insisted that set pieces would become a weapon, and they did. He insisted that intensity, not just structure, would bring victories, and the Palace match confirmed it. He insisted that pragmatism was not betrayal, but evolution, and the growing frequency of long balls proved he was willing to bend. But doubts lingered, nesting in every conversation around the club. What were they becoming? A team on the rise? A team surviving by fragments of fortune? A project held together by thin lines of belief? Manchester United had spent years trying to outrun their own unpredictability, and now unpredictability seemed to be the only thing moving them forward. Even Ruben Amorim himself appeared suspended between conviction and uncertainty. The man who arrived as a tactician was now something else, an adaptation machine, a curator of chaos, a conductor managing a band that rarely played the same song twice. He had been tested by Premier League turbulence, undermined by emotional fragility within the squad, buoyed by dramatic comebacks, and steadied by victories that felt more like warnings than celebrations. Set pieces became a refuge because open play still carried too much volatility. The back three shape evolved into a hybrid that no longer resembled his sporting blueprint. Fullbacks occupied heights on the pitch that made traditionalists uneasy. The number of goals conceded mocked any claim of defensive solidity. And yet, the resilience, the refusal to collapse told a different story. Crystal Palace's fatigue did not erase Manchester United's second-half dominance. It simply challenged its significance. Everton's numerical disadvantage did not excuse Manchester United's lethargy. It magnified their contradictions. Tottenham's late equalizer validated their belief. Nottingham Forest's late strike showed their grit. Liverpool's pressure revealed their nerves. Brighton's near comeback tested their composure. Each match became a different mirror, reflecting different versions of the same team. Through all of it, Ruben Amorim watched, measured, recalibrated. His decisions carried not just tactical implications, but emotional consequences. When he substituted Lenny Yoro after the young defender unraveled mentally, it was not punishment, it was protection. When he trusted Mason Mount in moments others feared he would break down injured, it was both risk and recognition. When he redesigned pressing patterns to accommodate players still learning to harmonize, he demonstrated patience disguised as ambition. Manchester United's unpredictability was no longer something analysts lamented. It became a central ingredient in the narrative. A team so inconsistent that even rivals feared them because they could erupt without warning. A side capable of looking lifeless one half and electrifying the next. A squad built on contradiction, thriving in instability, maturing in adversity. The defensive fragility remained an open wound, but the mentality, the inner fire, no longer flickered as weakly as before. Matches that once spelled doom now became canvases for late rewrites. Supporters who had grown numb to disappointment found themselves watching until the final whistle, not out of obligation, but because the team had rediscovered the ability to shock them. Manchester United had not become reliable. They had become alive. And Ruben Amorim, standing at the center of this whirlwind, had earned the right, if only barely, to continue writing his chapter. The club's hierarchy still backed him, their words reverberating through press conferences, even when results faltered. Those words alone did not guarantee safety, but the emotional stabilization of the squad suggested something deeper, a belief that the journey was leading somewhere, even if the destination refused to announce itself. As Manchester United prepared for the challenges ahead, one truth lingered, like smoke in the rafters of Old Trafford. Progress had arrived, cloaked in contradiction. They were better, yet still flawed. Stronger, yet still vulnerable. Inspired, yet still inconsistent. And this duality, the push and pull between hope and doubt, became the new reality. Ruben Amorim could not promise certainty. He could only promise evolution. The back three would hold. The fullbacks would soar. The long passes would bend games into new shapes. The set pieces would tighten their grip. The resilience would grow in shadows before emerging in light. The mistakes would hurt but teach. The victories would thrill but warn. Manchester United had entered an era where chaos did not signal collapse but transformation, where matches were puzzles solved in real time, where players faltered, then rose, where belief spread quietly, hidden beneath scars. And perhaps that is why, as winter approached and the fixtures softened, supporters felt something unfamiliar, stirring, not confidence exactly, but anticipation. The kind that precedes either triumph or heartbreak, the kind that signals a story not yet finished, because for the first time in a long time, Manchester United were not drifting. They were moving, sometimes stumbling, sometimes sprinting, but always moving. They were unpredictable, yes. But in that unpredictability, something resembling identity had begun to form. A fragile identity, shaped by setbacks and salvaged points, by late goals and tactical compromises, by emotional resilience and defensive chaos, by Ruben Amorim's adaptability and the squad's reluctant maturity. Tell me if this manager survives the season. Name the one player who should be sold immediately. Comment what you think is the club's real problem. Follow for more insider leaks from inside the dressing room.